All right, energy enthusiasts, buckle up, because we're diving headfirst into a global power struggle that's about to hit your wallet hard. You might think you're just filling up your gas tank, but behind the scenes, a huge energy battle is raging between the United States and OPEC, and it's getting seriously intense. For a hot minute, it looked like America was calling the shots. We were pumping out oil like crazy. Natural gas exports were through the roof, and Washington was basically saying, OPEC, thanks but no thanks, we got this. Remember the good old days of energy independence? Feels like a dream, right? But hold on, OPEC wasn't just going to sit back and let the US steal the show. Nah, they're veterans of this game, and they've got a playbook thicker than a phone book. Do people even have phone books anymore? So what did they do? They tightened their grip, slapped down production cuts, and cranked up those prices. Bam! Just like that, the energy game flipped on its head. Now, this isn't just some squabble about the price of oil going up a few cents. We're talking about a strategic power play, a high-stakes energy chess match where the prize is nothing less than global control. And trust me, OPEC doesn't make moves without a master plan brewing in the background. So, let's pull back the curtain and expose what's really going on. Because this affects everything. Your grocery bill, your commute, even the clothes you buy. It's all connected. For years, the US, riding the shale oil boom, flooded the market, basically elbowing OPEC out of its comfort zone. Countries like India and a bunch of European nations, longtime loyal customers to OPEC, started turning their eyes towards American energy. Can you blame them? Cheaper prices and less reliance on potentially unstable regimes seemed like a no-brainer. But that didn't exactly sit well with the OPEC cartel. They're not used to being told no, let me tell you. So they had to fight back. And how did they do it? They yanked supply off the market, squeezed those inventories tighter than my jeans after Thanksgiving dinner, and sent prices skyrocketing. Cha-ching! The message was clear. Hold up, world. We still decide the price of oil, got it? The US strategy was built around becoming an energy production monster. The idea was simple: drill, baby, drill. Drill faster, drill harder, and drown the market in cheap oil. Under the Trump administration, federal lands were flung open for drilling. Production soared to record highs, and for a glorious, fleeting moment, it felt like America was truly, finally, energy independent. And to some extent, it worked. We had more oil, lower prices, relatively speaking, of course, and OPEC was starting to look a little nervous. But here's the kicker, the big but that always seems to creep in. Pumping more oil is one thing, but controlling the entire market, that's a whole different ballgame. And now, with OPEC punching back with the force of 1,000 suns, we're starting to see some cracks forming in the US energy market. Now, here's the thing you really need to understand. OPEC isn't a single, unified, happy family. It's more like a dysfunctional group of siblings, each with their own hidden agendas and grudges. But when it comes to one thing, curbing US influence in the oil market, they're surprisingly willing to play nice. And guess who's at the center of this OPEC drama? Saudi Arabia and Iran, the two heavyweight rivals of the Middle East. Normally, they'd be at each other's throats, but right now, they find themselves strangely aligned. Iran, battered by US sanctions, is desperate for OPEC to stand strong against Washington. Saudi Arabia, flexing its massive oil muscle, is using its production power to keep prices pumped up. It's a shaky alliance, built on mutual self-interest, but for now, it's holding together. And that makes OPEC's response even more powerful. Now, imagine this. The US decides to double down and flood the market with even more oil. What happens next? Chaos. A potential high-stakes standoff with OPEC that could leave everyone burned. On paper, the flood the market strategy sounds logical, right? Drown them in oil, drive prices down, and force OPEC to reconsider those pesky production cuts. But in the real world, it's not that simple. This move comes with a whole basket of risks. First, you gotta understand how OPEC really works. Unlike the US, where private companies drill and sell oil based on those sweet market demands, OPEC countries coordinate their production levels to manipulate prices. That's right, it's all about control. So, if the US starts pumping out oil like a fire hose to drive down costs, OPEC could retaliate by slashing production even further, squeezing that supply and keeping those prices sky high despite all of America's efforts. We're talking about an energy state that benefits absolutely no one. And then there's the pesky issue of storage. Oil isn't like iPhones. You can't just pile them up in a warehouse indefinitely. If there's too much oil and not enough buyers, those storage tanks fill up faster than you can say supply chain crisis. And producers are forced to either slow down production and lose money, or sell at rock bottom prices and lose even more money. We've seen this movie before. Remember that horrifying moment in 2020 when oil prices briefly went negative? Producers were paying people to take oil off their hands. A repeat of that scenario could spell disaster for American producers, especially the smaller ones, and it would hand OPEC a huge victory. OPEC's influence isn't just about how much oil they produce. It's about the type of oil they control. Remember, US shale oil is light and sweet, great for some things, but many refineries need that heavier, more complex crude oil to operate efficiently. Even if the US unleashes a tidal wave of shale oil, it can't fully replace the kind of crude that OPEC specializes in. That means American refineries would still need to import oil, even at a higher cost, making them less competitive and pushing up prices for consumers. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about money, honey. Many OPEC nations, especially Saudi Arabia, are rolling in cash. They've got deep pockets and can afford to weather a price war. They're playing the long game, people. Meanwhile, US oil producers, especially those smaller shale companies, operate on much tighter profit margins. If prices crash too low, many of them would simply go out of business. Poof, gone, giving OPEC even more control once the American competition is wiped out. It's ruthless, I know, but that's the reality of the game. But beyond the cold, hard economics, there's a geopolitical dimension to this energy battle that you can't ignore. OPEC isn't a single, unified force. It's a group of nations with their own competing interests, their own political baggage, and their own agendas. But when it comes to one thing, countering US influence in the oil market, they're surprisingly willing to set aside their differences and work together. We're talking about unlikely alliances forming, and old rivalries being temporarily put on hold. Think about it. Saudi Arabia and Iran, two nations that have been sworn enemies for decades, have found common ground in limiting oil supply to keep those prices sky high. It's a strange bedfellow situation, to say the least. And then you have Russia, another major oil producer, who's playing its own complicated game. With Western sanctions hammering its oil exports, Moscow has been scrambling to find ways to bypass those restrictions, selling crude to China, India, and other nations desperate for energy. In short, the more chaotic the global energy market becomes, the easier it is for Russia to slip through the cracks, continue funding its war machine, and thumb its nose at the West. So, what's the alternative? What if the US decides to take a softer approach? I know. Softer isn't exactly in the American vocabulary these days, but hear me out. What if the US tries diplomacy? That would mean actually negotiating with key OPEC members, especially Saudi Arabia, to persuade them to ease up on those production cuts. But even this seemingly simple solution is fraught with peril. For one thing, the US and Saudi Arabia have a complicated relationship. While they've been strategic allies for decades, tensions have been rising over human rights issues, military conflicts, and shifting global alliances. It's not exactly a picture of unwavering trust and cooperation. So, convincing the Saudis to increase production might require some serious concessions from the US. We're talking about potential security guarantees, lucrative weapons deals, or even economic incentives. Basically, we might have to give up something big to get what we want. But even if Saudi Arabia agrees, that doesn't mean the entire OPEC cartel will fall in line. Countries like Iran and Venezuela, both under heavy U.S. sanctions, might have zero interest in cooperating with Washington's plans. They might actually benefit from the chaos. And without the full support of OPEC, any deal the U.S. makes would have limited impact, leaving us right back where we started. So, both strategies, flooding the market with U.S. oil or negotiating with OPEC, are risky, complicated, and potentially disastrous. There's no easy way out of this mess, folks. It's a true energy quagmire. If the U.S. pushes too hard, it could trigger a price war that backfires spectacularly. If it plays too soft, it risks losing even more influence over the global energy market, leaving us vulnerable to the whims of OPEC and other players. For now, all eyes are on the next move. Right now, every move the U.S. makes is like walking a tightrope high above a shark-infested ocean. One wrong step, and the entire energy market could plunge into chaos. It's a nail-biting situation, to say the least. Hope you found that helpful. Don't forget to hit that like button if you did, and subscribe to stay up to date on our latest videos. We appreciate you.